So I'm Lynn Collett with Stow TV, and I'm here with Jason Viola, and I'm going to let him introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Jason Viola. I write graphic novels or comics. I have 3 books in the science comics series and a new book that came out about history, Prohibition era. Yeah. I live in Stow, and I'm also the program director of the Boston Comic Arts Foundation.
Okay. So how did you get started in graphic novels?
I've been interested in making comics since I was really young. When I was a kid, I loved comics, especially comic strips in the newspaper. My favorite newspaper comic strip was Garfield, and I used to, I'd cut out the Garfield comics every week on Sunday, because those were the ones in color, and I would tape them to my bedroom wall until my wall was wallpapered in Garfield comics, and I'd read them over and over. And then I pretty soon started drawing Garfield and copying the comics, and the more I copied them, the more I kind of got to understand how they worked, and I wanted to start making my own comics. So I started making a comic every day when I was 8 or 9. I'd draw a comic strip every day called Acronym, which was just like Garfield, except it was about a bird instead of a cat, and instead of hating Mondays, he hated Wednesdays. And I pretended that it was published in the newspaper. I used to make holiday specials and wall calendars, and I knew more than anything that I wanted to make comics when I grew up. And that kind of, as I got older, I felt like I kind of grew out of comics, because at that time there really weren't the kind of the graphic novels that you can get now at the library. They just didn't really exist back then, and it seemed to me like this was something for kids, so I decided I wanted to be a writer. And years later, as an adult, I rediscovered comics, and I got really excited about them again, and I started drawing comics again, and I started putting them online, and I would go to these festivals where we'd trade books, and I got to meet people, and that kind of led me on this path to write comics professionally, from the networks that I made there at those festivals.
Nice. So did you go to school for this at all, or did you just kind of organically?
I was an English major, so sort of.
Yeah. Okay.
But I didn't go to school to learn how to make comics specifically. I kind of learned how to do that from the stuff I did when I was a kid, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was your first published book?
The science comics Polar Bears was the first one. Yep.
So is it more educational? Is it more of a story?
All of the books in the science comics series are educational. They all cover different topics like volcanoes or solar system, and they use stories to cover those topics and characters. So the Polar Bears book is about, for the first 2.5 years of a polar bear's life, they learn everything they need to know to hunt and survive in the Arctic from their mother. So the Polar Bears book is about a mother polar bear and her 2 cubs, and she kind of, basically teaches them how to be a polar bear, and we learn along with her.
Oh, very cool. So you do a lot of work with the Stow Public Library.
Yeah, I've done some workshops there, and a couple of talks. Yep. So
what do the workshops involve?
The workshops I've done there, it's called Story Builder. And it's a 3-part series, and so there are these collaborative workshops. And the first one it's a world building workshop. We build this world together, and then in the next one we learn how to create a character that lives in that world, and then in the third one, I give them tools to start a story with the character that they made. So they all kind of build on each other, but there's a lot of, there's independent exercises where the students will, or I guess they're not students, they're at the library, but the kids will, they'll do some stuff on their own, but a lot of it is we're kind of coming up with this stuff together, and we kind of build this, shared world and story that they can go off and use if they want.
So when they're finished with your workshop, do they actually have a book? when they're done, or a graphic novel?
No, they don't. They don't have a book. It's they have the start of a story that they could continue working on if they want.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, did you want to expand on that?
No, I was just going to say, and it's not specifically comics either. Like if they want to do comics, that's great, but it's more of a writing workshop. And it's pretty. I just did some of these in, not here, but in a school in Wyoming for 5th graders, and it's just amazing how creative these older kids can be, and all the ideas that they will bring to it, and how inspired they are. And like in school, they don't really get. I don't feel like they get that experience to like have fun with writing. It's more structured.
Yeah.
And some of them really, respond to it well. In fact, some kids, when I was over there, on my second visit for the second day, they had already kind of gone off on their own and started making their own separate world and had like pages of notes about it. So it's pretty fun.
So do school districts contact you to come and visit them and run this program?
Yeah, the writing workshop isn't something that I've done a whole lot. I usually have like an author talk that I do at schools, like an hour-long talk in the cafeteria or something. And it's interactive, but it's not like a workshop. It's more about like the writing process and how I do research and revisions and stuff that kind of pertains to the things they're working on directly in school.
Okay, so the school districts would reach out to you through your website?
Yeah,
Okay.
That's often how they've contacted me,
All
or
right.
word of mouth, yeah.
Okay, so where is it you want to go with these?
Where do I want to go?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
So you're building upon them and you're not going to stop.
It's not like my series. It's just, and same with the history comics book. Like it's part of a larger series. But yeah, I am working on. I can't talk too much about it. But there's another project I was working on this year that's more of like an adventure story that's based on a real person that I got to work with and collaborate with on the book, and it was a lot of fun. And I've got another science-related book that I'm working on starting this year. Yeah.
So are you commissioned for these, or these are just ideas you come up with and then you run with it?
No, they've reached out to me. The publishers will contact me, and they'll say, yeah, like with the polar bears, they wanted a book about polar bears specifically, and asked if I'd be able to write it. I did pitch the elephants book because I love elephants.
Okay.
But for the most part, yeah, they've asked me to do these specific things that they wanted. Yeah.
So when you write these books, are you also doing the illustrations?
I'm not. I do feel like it's helpful that I've drawn comics for so long, because it kind of informs the way that I write the scripts for the artists. But I really love. I would not be able to do the art, I don't think, comfortably. I wouldn't have. Art takes a lot longer than writing. And I do feel like because I'd spent so many years of my life not drawing and focusing on writing, I didn't develop those skills as well. But I've learned just the first book that I worked on here with polar bears, like how much fun it is to collaborate with another person because they bring their own ideas to the project. And it's just been, every book that I've written with where another artist is involved, I really loved. I love that way of working.
So how do you when you collaborate with your illustrators, how do they come together? Are they recommended to you? Are they people that you normally work with?
The publisher picks the illustrator. Mm-hmm. They usually will look at what it is that I'm trying to do and find the right match for it. And I've been really fortunate to have just really the right people in every project. The collaboration's always worked a little differently. In some ways I'm, talking with them kind of throughout the process. In other ways other times it's a little more removed. Sometimes we're doing, like with the Prohibition book, we ended up doing things at the same time. Like I'd write like 20 pages, and they would get to work on them, and I'd meanwhile be writing other pages, and that was an interesting way to work, because sometimes the art that the artist produced on the early pages influenced the way I wrote about the later pages. Yeah, they've all been a little different, but it is more collaborative, unlike, say, like with picture books where the writers and artists are completely isolated. And comics, it's often not quite so much, because you're telling the story with art. You rely so heavily on it that the collaboration, I think, it's just, you have to be a little more in sync.
That makes sense. So how did you find your publisher? Or did they find you?
They found me. It's Macmillan, so they're not hard to find. But and National Geographic, like they're. But yeah, no. In all cases, they found me. I mean, the editor of the series Science Comics knew me and my work from going to these comics festivals, and so I was just in the. When he was looking for writers and artists, that's what led him to me, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you want to talk about any of your books? Do you want to highlight any of them?
Sure, I can go into it. So, the digestive system book is about a bacterium that lives inside of your mouth, and one day it is accidentally swallowed, and it goes on a journey through the digestive tract.
Okay.
On this quest to find a legendary paradise for bacteria at the end of the tube. And along the way, it meets other bacteria and microbes that help or hinder its quest. And we get to learn about all the organs of the digestive system and the products that the body makes. The elephants book is about an 8-year-old elephant named Dooney, whose family is going through a lot of changes, and she's worried that it's going to fall apart. And I really enjoyed the story and the character for that one. She has a lot of emotions. I kind of thought about, like, what if Judy Blume wrote a science book? And the Prohibition book is kind of that is more of a straightforward story, where it's about 100 years of the temperance movement in the Prohibition era. It's just more of a it's for kids. So I had to kind of figure out, how do I write about so much drunkenness and alcoholism and gangster violence for kids. Okay. And so it kind of takes a health class approach, where we're just kind of straightforwardly explaining what, this is what alcohol is, and this is what it does to your body, and this is what alcoholism is. And the narrator is kind of like an embodiment of alcohol. He's like this character that morphs and shapeshifts into different things to kind of represent the different perspectives that people have throughout history and different pockets of society. So those are the books. The Critter Chat book is not really a comic. It is it's from a National Geographic Kids series that imagines, like, what if animals had social media and we're like texting each other all day. That one has lots of like facts in it, but there's no like full story. It's just a lot of jokes and stuff.
Oh, fun.
Mm-hmm.
So when you write these, do you have children in mind, or are these a broader audience?
I definitely have children in mind, but I write them for myself and think of jokes that I would find funny. And I think the Prohibition book was the first time where I really had to consider, like, how do I approach this for kids? Yeah. And I probably would have written that differently if it wasn't supposed to be for kids. But really only like the framing of it might have been different, but essentially all of the information I'm sharing would have been the same.
So are there advisors when you're writing these books as to what direction they want you to go in? Or how to approach?
So all the Science Comics books are like they're reviewed by experts working out in the field. They're fact checked by scientists, and so we'll send them the art and the scripts throughout the process, and they'll send us volumes of notes back about the mistakes that we made and the things that we got wrong, if that's what you mean. But throughout, yes, I'm working with an editor for each draft.
So how long is the whole from start to finish? So they'll come to you and say, I would like a story on Prohibition. And then from start to finish, what does the whole process look like?
I mean, from the time I start working on it to the time it's in bookstores, it's generally 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Although the Prohibition book was 5 years and Elephants was 5 years, it kind of depends. My process, I'll usually spend like 6 months, but then there's potential revisions throughout afterwards, when it's getting reviewed by, it'll be 6 months for like a first draft, say. And then by the time I've done the 4th or 5th draft, I don't know how long it's been at that point. But the art takes a long time, and actually, the publishing process is putting it in the right schedule to get it printed is, that's part of it too.
Okay.
I'm not actively working on it for 3 years.
I didn't realize it took that long.
I don't know I feel like that's typical for a book, but I don't really know.
Do you work on multiple books at a time?
I try not to.
Okay.
I have, but not by design. Sometimes what'll happen is I'll start working on another book, and then meanwhile I might have to make some revisions to this other book that's in process, or review, look at the art that's coming in, stuff like that. There's definitely an overlap, but I'm not like actively working on, like when I'm really into the writing process, I'm not doing two at the same time.
Okay. So how do they promote these? Do they promote them to schools? Do they just put them out as graphic novels and hope for the best?
I can't speak exactly to how the marketing department works, but I know that like schools and libraries are a big part of their promotion. Yeah, that's their focus, but I don't know.
So do they have you come out for book signings or anything?
No, not really.
Really?
Yeah, I think the series itself, when the series first came out, there was a lot more of that, and now it's more established, I think, is the way that they view it, so that they don't quite work as hard to send their authors out places and do these types of visits. I mean, I have gone to bookstores and stuff, but it's not something that the publicist has at Macmillan has been involved with. Yeah.
So would you recommend this to anybody, or if anyone wanted to get into graphic novels, what would you recommend they do?
Well, I would recommend, what I usually recommend is what I did, and it's to find people to go to these festivals and share your work with them. There's a lot of stuff happening online now as well. You can take that route and try to build an audience online. But I mean, both approaches are good. But I mean, there's also a lot more programs now. There's a lot of schools that have great programs for making comics. Vermont has an excellent school where you can get a master's degree.
Oh, wow.
The Center for Cartoon Studies, yeah, it's a 2-year program, and there's definitely a lot of different routes, probably more than there were 10, 15 years ago.
All right. What is your writing process?
Like every idea that you have, I think, comes with questions to answer or like a problem to solve. Mm-hmm. And when I've found, I don't know, it's not me. It's like when you need to solve a problem, it's often easier to talk it out with someone, or to write about it in your diary, or go to therapy. And so I take that approach when I'm writing. Like if I have an idea and I'm not really sure what to do with it, or if I have, if I'm stuck with a part in the story that I don't know how to get from like point A to point B, I will write about it as if it's as if I'm writing a letter to myself or an email, and I'll be very casual. Like I'll just say like, so, here's the problem. I'm trying to figure out how do I get from A to B. If I do this, then this other, complication happens, and I'm not sure how to deal with that. And then, one thing I could consider is, what if I did this and this and this? And, well, that would bring up this new issue. But then, now that I think about it, and I'll just like kind of write like that. And that helps in a couple of ways. First, it always gets me somewhere. But it also, like with writer's block, people talk about like the tyranny of the blank page, and I don't have that because I don't care about what it is I'm writing. I can write just like, and now it's not a blank page anymore. And I can just keep going like that. And if I get stuck, like I will, continue doing that. I used to be very, I used to write in a notebook, all that stuff, and then I would, later on try to like make something out of it. But now, like that is kind of how I write. I'll just write in this longish letter to myself, and then I'll kind of delete and sculpt it into something and refine it. It's become like kind of a natural part of the way that I write.
The connection between the science and the graphic novels.
Yeah, I think that comics are a great way to teach science and complex ideas. There's a lot of different ways you can look at it, but for me, there's three big things, and one is that when you are trying to understand a process, like having visuals is very important. If you're reading a science textbook or an article that's trying to explain something complex, there is often a diagram or some visual aid, and comics just expands upon it. They're all visual aids, and there's this concept of like, Scott McCloud talks about a low cognitive load. When you're reading a comic, your brain is doing less work to understand what you're reading, so you're able to put in more information. And in the digestive system book, it's very dense. There's a lot of information there. But if you get stuck if you're reading it, you're in third grade, you are not going to absorb everything that I'm telling you. But there's enough in the pictures that you can still follow along the gist. You understand what's happening, and you can keep moving in a way that, like, if you were just reading text, I think you would stop. And you wouldn't be able to kind of like, you would get lost and like you couldn't understand what's happening and you wouldn't be able to continue. I learned when I was meeting, after the Polar Bears book, and I was meeting kids who loved the science comic series, I learned that they read them over and over again. And so I knew that I could put stuff in there that they may not grasp the first time, but they'll absorb more and more each time. And maybe when they're in high school and they're studying for their AP bio test, they'll say, hey, I've got that digestive system book, I wonder, and it will still be useful to them. It's got that much info that they can then use it later on. And I think that that's like a real benefit to comics. The big thing that I like about these books is that they're packed with stories. And that's my attraction, because I like telling stories. I think that the thing with comics is that there's, storytelling is so native to this art form. There's a persona, like you don't really blink at like the anthropomorphizing that happens in comics. If something inanimate starts talking, it's kind of like comics has kind of inherited that as part of its language. You don't really say, what is going on here? Or like, I don't have to explain, like I don't have to sell it to you. You just kind of like get that that's happening. And so you can just have tons of metaphors, and it's just a shorthand that is like natural to the medium. And you can have stories upon stories upon stories. I have one of the things that I one of the examples I give when I'm doing presentations at schools is like there's, so do you know what color polar bear fur is?
I would say white.
You would say white? It's not actually white. Polar bear fur is clear.
Oh.
It's transparent, and it just reflects whatever color light is shined on it. And underneath, and then a polar bear fur is made up of these two layers. There's these long, coarse hairs called guard hairs, and a thick, woolly undercoat. And their skin is completely black. When heat escapes from a polar bear's body, it's reflected back down by these transparent, clear guard hairs, and then it gets absorbed by the black skin, and that's one way that they're able to stay warm. And we use a lot of visuals to describe this. And with the guard hairs and the heat, we've got like two panels. There's faces on the hairs, and the little heat pockets have faces, and the hairs are like, they're like, you shall not pass, and they're like, not allowing the heat to like, escape. And we've turned, we've created little characters and told a little story in two panels that you don't really think that much about. You just kind of get it and move on, but like it helps illustrate this idea, even if you're not completely following the text. And then the bigger stories that we tell, like in the digestive system book, is, as he's going on this quest and meeting all of these microorganisms, like you really get the sense of all of the communities that live in your gut and are an essential part of digestion because, and the different types of communities and bacteria because they're characters in the book. With the polar bears book, global warming is part of it, and that is such a big concept. But in the book, we learn about, like, with the concept I just described about the black skin getting, with the transparent hairs reflecting heat and the black skin absorbing it, it helps you understand the albedo effect that is the reason why the Arctic is, well, one of the reasons why the Arctic is in such a critical state and is more affected by climate change than other parts of the world. And we also learn about like all the microorganisms that live underneath the ice flows that the polar bears live on that form the basis of the whole food web in the Arctic. And so we know like, oh, this isn't just, the ice isn't just where polar bears go to hunt. It actually is the whole, it forms the whole, without the ice, there wouldn't be the algae that the fish eat, that the seals eat, that the polar bears then eat, it just wouldn't exist. And because we're following these polar bears all along, and we learn about all the different types of ice and how critical it is, we're watching this young polar bear, two of them kind of grow up and learn, and by the end, able to hunt their own seals, and we're rooting for them. And so the stakes feel higher, like we really kind of like, because of that story and the characters, like the impact is a little more meaningful.
Did you know that when you started this polar bear story, you liked polar bears, but did you know it was going to get into all these other areas? No,
I didn't know much about polar bears at all.
Right.
All I knew is they lived in the Arctic and they like to eat seals, and that is also one of the things I'll talk about too in these talks is like just the research that I have to do. Like I wrote this book about polar bears, but I didn't really know much about them. So no, I had no idea that it would touch upon any other things.
And that it would be that relevant right now?
No, I mean I guess as far as that goes, like they have been kind of a symbol of climate change. So I had that association. But that's all I really knew, yeah.
Right, because I knew the association also, but I just didn't know why.
Yeah.
And you start and talk about the ecosystem and how it all works and how they're affected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had no idea about that stuff. It was fascinating, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in all of your books you have, do you have a favorite?
I think the elephants book is my favorite.
And you keep bringing the elephants up. Why is the elephants your favorite?
I find elephants fascinating, how emotionally complex they are, and they were really fun to, it was just fun to write that story. Like I really cared about the characters that I was writing, and I could have made it, I felt like I could have made it, 100 pages longer just to flesh out their story more. Like
Okay.
it was a really, and I really liked the way that, the science is married with the story in that book. It's in some ways a small story. Like there's no big quest or anything. It's just about this family of elephants going through changes. But a lot of things happen with this character it's kind of a coming of age story, who's kind of growing up and finding her place.
Tell us about the foundation.
So the Boston Comic Arts Foundation is an organization that is trying to build a community around the comics as an art form. There's 4 festivals that we're involved with right now. There's the Massachusetts Independent Comics Expo, or MICE, which just celebrated its 15th year. There's the Boston Kids Comics Festival, Boston Comics in Color, which features artists of color, and the Boston CalmerCon, which is for neurodivergent audiences. And we also do week-long comics workshops for underserved populations called comics camps. We have a monthly discussion series in Somerville called Picture and Panel, where 2 cartoonists are in conversation with a local moderator. And then we have, small grants to help people self-publish their comics. And then we have a new award that just came out for MICE, the Underground Visionary Award. That's what the foundation does. And you were asking about how you go about starting a festival. So,
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
MICE, that foundation kind of was sprung out of MICE, which is a 2-day independent comics festival. For a while it was in Cambridge, and now it's at BU. And that came out of there were at that time several festivals like this around the country. These aren't really like Comic-Cons where people put on costumes and go and buy toys and stuff. This is more about, personal stories and self-expression. And at a lot of these events, people will be making their own comics, and you'll go and you'll meet creators of comics more than you would meet like people who were in a TV show or something.
Okay.
And it is a great way to find your community of like-minded people trying to tell their own stories. When I was first going to these festivals, it reminded me a lot of the poetry community, where people kind of like make chapbooks, and there's lots of small micro presses and stuff, and people will trade, and there's also small festivals devoted to them. And it's also fairly insular, and there's like big fish and small ponds, and the comics community was like that as well. But it was just really like exciting to be in a place where other people are interested in the same things and wanting to do the same things. And there wasn't really one in Boston. There was a zine fest that was held every year that like the cartoonists would come to, but then they stopped having that. So MICE kind of sprung out of that need, like, why don't we do something like that here? And it grew. It's become a very, among independent comics festivals, it's become a big festival.
Okay.
And then the other festivals that we have are each festival is run by a different group of people, but we all it's sort of like a consortium of festivals. And then we have other programs where we do other things too. So I'm not involved directly in running any of these festivals, including MICE. We're kind of more, we kind of provide the infrastructure and the finance for all that stuff to happen. How people would make their own festival, I don't know exactly how you would start, but we have kind of a framework that we've, when we are working with a new festival, like we do have kind of like best practices and resources to kind of help them establish a festival. I don't know what the first steps are. I mean, I guess it would be like you need other people to help. Some people try to make it all on their own, and they burn out. And you kind of just find a venue that, like a library, that's reasonable and maybe free. And I'd have to think more about that question. I'm sorry.
Well, I was
about
just
how to
wondering-
actually, like a blueprint for starting a festival.
So you started because Zen pretty much went away and you developed one?
The zine fairs kind of ended. Yeah, we were kind of talking about it anyway. And I was busy with my own, my wife, Rebecca, was one of the founders of MICE, and she was working with some other folks, Shelley Paroline and Dan Mazer, to help make that festival a reality at the time. Yeah.
Okay, and it kind of grew out of that.
Yeah, the foundation grew out of that because what really started out to exist. It existed just to produce MICE,
Okay.
but later on we were interested in doing more things. And we were a fiscal sponsor for these other festivals, and we said, hey, why don't we have a more formal relationship?
Nice. Is there one coming up?
So MICE just finished. A few weeks ago, we had our 15th MICE. The next festival would be Comics in Color, which is at the Reggie Lewis Center in Boston, and that is April,
Okay.
I think. Yeah.
Well, if we can find that, we can probably put that at the bottom, right? Because there's probably a website for it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah. BostonComicArts.org would be the place to go.
Okay. So MICE just finished up. So how did that go?
It went great.
Yeah?
I was there for a day, but I mean, it's I don't know what the attendance were, but it was very, very busy. Lots of families coming through. Everyone seemed very happy. We had a great,
So somebody doing it for the first time, what would they expect when they walk? Would they feel comfortable walking in there, or does it feel...
MICE is a free show,
Oh.
and the reason all of our festivals are free, and they'll stay free, and it's to encourage people who are curious about it to check it out. Whereas any kind of admission would be, and we don't want any kind of barrier to entry. So we've had people who will just come and see what it's all about for a year, and then the next year they get more involved. And we've definitely had stories. In fact, one story I like to tell is I know someone named Jordan who did just that. Her boyfriend dragged her along, and then pretty soon though she started making her own comics, and then she became an organizer, like a volunteer at MICE, and then an organizer of the festival.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So and we've had other stories too about people who will come to the festival for the first time and be blown away and start making their own comics, and then later become exhibitors. And yeah, it's pretty remarkable. So yeah, it's definitely set up so that anybody could come, even if you're just curious about it. You will get a good idea of what's going on by walking around and seeing the different spaces.
So as a new person walking in, what would I expect to see?
You would expect to see lots of tables where artists and writers are set up selling their work. You would see a mix of people who have been in the industry for a while with professionally published graphic novels, and other people who have self-published their own comic and printed it out and stapled little books together. You'll see spaces. We have a place called the Cartoonarium where we have artists who are doing live drawing. There's a little camera on them so you could see what they're drawing. And there'll be workshops that will be around where there are some workshops that are very basic, kids workshops, how to make a character, and then there's more advanced workshops like lettering things like that, and storytelling. And there are panels where we have, authors on a stage talking about their work. It's like it's kind of like a literary event, a mix between like a Boston Book Festival and something more like a zine fair or a craft fair.
Okay. Oh, awesome. So just the last thing, your work, when you're talking about the digestive system, it reminds me of the Miss Frizzle series.
Oh, yeah.
So was she an inspiration at all, or the writer, actually? But
Sorry?
I mean, the Miss Frizzle series, my
Yeah.
kids did that. That was a lot of fun.
No, I'm not that familiar with the Miss Frizzle series. I mean, I'm aware of it, but
The Magic School Bus.
Yeah. But I wasn't. It was a little later than my childhood.
Yeah.
So I'm aware, but I wasn't super. I wasn't. No, I love that series though, and yeah, I think that it's a good analogy. These books are for middle grade, so it's a little older,
Yep.
but it's definitely the same. It's a similar concept.
It's fun.
Yeah.
Making science more fun.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I
Yep.
think it's great. Where can we find your books?
You could find them at Randall Library,
Yeah.
the Silver Unicorn,
Okay.
or any bookstore really.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
and-
awesome.
Yeah.
Do you know if you don't know if our school system has the books?
I know that they have science comics books.
Okay.
I don't know specifically which ones.
Okay.
But yeah, I know
We'll have
that
to
they
look
have
that up.
some of them.
No, I just anything to make science fun, I think, is awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely popular. I've talked with a lot of school librarians, and they all, they say they have trouble keeping the books on the shelves.
Awesome.
I mean, the series in general, like there are some kids who are really into them. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. This was great.
Yeah, thank you. I had a great time.
You can come again too.
Okay, great.
If you want to talk about a specific book, or you want to actually run one of your programs like you do in the library,
okay,
and
fun.
reach more people.
Great.
So, and why do you do that? I mean, you go to the library and you're teaching people how to write.
The writing workshops, why do I do it?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I find it really fun to work with kids, and like I was describing before, it's exciting to see how energized they get coming up with ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like that, with these workshops going into it, they don't really know what they want to do, or they don't we don't have any, like, they don't come in with any like ideas already necessarily, and by the end of it we have this whole world with a lot of rules and characters, and it's just it's exciting to see how inspired they get by it.
Yeah.
The story building workshop too, like even without all of that stuff, like it's fun to see, kids might have an idea for characters, but they're not really sure what to do with them, and I give them like a little structure to kind of like, easy questions to ask to kind of like start, building a story that they just didn't have before.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Again, thank you very much. This
Thank
is
you.
great.
Thanks.